Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. Regular listeners to St. Louis Public Radio will know that our We Live Here podcast began a new season a couple of weeks ago. The focus all this season will be on housing. In Part 1, reporter-producers Kameel Stanley and Tim Lloyd spend some time talking about nuisance ordinances. Kameel Stanley is with us in studio to discuss the latest episode with some startling information, I think, about how one community uses these ordinances. Hi, Kameel.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great.
Good.
Maplewood. I was really surprised to hear this latest episode.
Yeah.
What's going on?
So the city of Maplewood is being sued right now in federal court over the way that it uses its nuisance law. It's being sued by the ACLU on behalf of a woman named Rosetta Watson, who was a Maplewood resident a few years ago. She was in a domestic violence situation. She called police for help, and under their nuisance law, if there are 2 or more police calls within, I believe, 6 months, you could be considered a public nuisance.
Who is complaining? Is it neighbors or is it the police themselves? Who is active in this?
Well, Maplewood officials will tell you that this all stems back from the mid-2000s when they had something called a problem properties list. That could be for everything from just, neighbors upset about about a property or an apartment complex or something like that. But sometimes there's no special carve-out. So whether like a police call comes from a neighbor or a police call comes from perhaps you yourself calling for help, it's the number of police calls that kind of triggers the first look.
As I recall, having listened to the most recent episode, a domestic abuse call counts. If you get 2 domestic abuse cases in this period of time, you're a nuisance.
It counts. And when Tim and I were producing this episode, we reached out to the city of Maplewood, which they declined to talk with us. But they had talked to a former St. Louis Public Radio colleague of ours some months back. And so we were able to access those interviews. And in those interviews, they said, no one's really asked us to do a special carve-out. And they think that the way that they're using the law is fine. And obviously there's a different side that says that it's a problem.
Yeah. Is a particular population being targeted? Is targeted a word that could be used in this concept?
There are a lot of housing advocates and legal advocates who say that it is. And, those groups are the ones that we have come to expect. It's people of color, domestic violence victims, people who are maybe mentally ill, and there are many who will say there's a more nefarious thing underlining all this is just the patterns of the way housing ordinances have been used to discriminate or to push out people who municipalities may not want in their communities.
Pushing them out. This is not a permanent push out, is it?
In the case of Maplewood, one of the things that they can do if you are declared a public nuisance, one of the remedies is they can revoke your occupancy permit. And if you live in the St. Louis region, then you know that some municipalities have occupancy permits. And unlike some places where I live, an occupancy permit doesn't necessarily have to do with do you have fire alarms or things like that. It has to do with actually them keeping track of who is living someplace. So one of the things Maplewood can do is they can revoke that occupancy permit, and you got to go.
Can you come back?
They can revoke it, I believe, for up to 6 months. In Miss Watson's case, she had her occupancy permit taken away, so she had to leave. She had to move out. And she did not ever get back to Maplewood, even though that was, for her, a safe place at one point.
Where do people go?
Wherever they can. There's a lot of people in our region who, for whatever reason, they lose their housing and they're forced to figure it out. For some people that ends up, they end up on the street. For other people, maybe they're able to find some sort of temporary housing. They're able to get with somebody. But the issue of affordable housing in this city is large, and so this is just one of the ways that can push people into that situation.
It's another form of eviction, it seems to me. Do their goods, their furniture and belongings go with them?
It depends on what kind of resources they have. For Miss Watson, she's honest about the fact that for her, it kind of spiraled into, she was homeless for a period of time. And keep in mind, she's also dealing with a domestic violence issue. So for her, it was, losing your housing can be would be difficult, I think, for anyone. But if you're already in a vulnerable situation, it can be pretty perilous.
Are you still paying rent when you're kicked out?
Well, no, I mean she had to go.
Just go. All relationship with that abode ends.
She lost her ability to live within the city of Maplewood for 6 months, and she was never able to get back there.
Is this legal? I mean, it seems to me just to be so extreme as to perhaps be illegal.
The lawyers on Ms. Watson's side say that it's an unconstitutional law, but I will say that there are many municipalities who have versions of this, perhaps maybe not linked directly to an occupancy permit, but most cities have nuisance laws on the books to deal with everything from like trashy lots to perhaps I used to live in a place where they use their nuisance law primarily to go after like rowdy businesses. One thing, however, that we've seen in the last few years is that those same laws that maybe I think most people would agree you need to have some sort of mechanism if you have a really bad business in town, those can be used against people, against individuals. And this is not something that's the St. Louis region has just a lock on. This has been cited in places like New York and Florida and all different ways across the country. And it's something that here local housing advocates have been focused on, have been trying to keep their eye out for if there's been any sort of negative or disparate impacts to vulnerable populations from nuisance laws.
Just one final question. I want to be clear on this. The woman about whom you're reporting was forced out of her home. She's not going back. She could have gone back in 6 months under the existing law, correct?
She would have had to apply for a new occupancy permit. By that time, her life was already spiraled. And also the experience of being, kicked out of a town is not necessarily one that may make you want to run back.
And the ACLU has got the case now, and any word on when this is going to go to court?
They are scheduled to go to mediation this summer.
Mediation.
And if nothing is resolved then, they will go to trial in the fall.
Who's the other side of the mediation? Is it the city of Maplewood?
The city of Maplewood, yeah.
What a story. Where does it go from here?
Actually where it goes from here is it's really hard to track how these nuisance laws are being played out in the St. Louis region. So one thing that we're asking is that people go to our website, welivehere.show, and fill out our contact form and inform us about ways that they have experienced nuisance laws in the St. Louis region.
We'll certainly put a link to that on our station website if it's not there already, Kameel Stanley.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Kameel is co-producer along with reporter Tim Lloyd of We Live Here. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.